Hello and welcome to our Bible study for today. Today we're going to be in First Samuel, so get your Bible so you can follow along. In First Samuel 16, Samuel anointed David to be the next king of Israel. In First Samuel 17, David defeated Goliath. Well, David was then a hero, but Saul, the current king of Israel, was jealous. He began to chase David. David fled to the wilderness, joined by 600 misfit men and his brothers, and he became their captain. Well, this makeshift army was camping near the sheep of Nabal. Nabal was very rich, and Nabal had a wife named Abigail. I think one of my friends, Abigail, and her family may be watching today. Hello, Abigail and Gloria and Samuel and Miss Amanda and Mr. David. Well, today we're going to hear about a woman in the Bible named Abigail. But first, let's hear about Nabal. Let's read 1 Samuel 25, verses 2 through 3. It says, "And there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel. The man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep, 1,000 goats. He was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. The woman was discerning and beautiful, but the man was harsh and badly behaved. He was a Calebite." Did you hear that? Nabal wasn't so nice. He was a Calebite, which is very surprising that he wasn't so nice because you might remember that Moses sent spies to look at the promised land before they entered. Joshua and Caleb were two of those spies. Joshua and Caleb, along with all the other spies, saw the big people in the promised land. But those two weren't afraid. They knew that God could help them to defeat those giants in the promised land and take the land that he had promised them. Well, Nabal is a descendant from that brave Caleb, but Nabal isn't acting very well, is he? Let's see what happens in the Bible. David and his men are camping near Nabal's sheep. And so then in 1 Samuel 25, 4 through 8, let's see what happens. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men. And David said to the young men, "Go to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. And thus you shall greet him. Peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shears. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we did no harm to them, and they missed nothing all the time that they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, yet let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David." So David is telling Nabal, "Peace be to you. We've been camping near your sheep, and nothing has happened to your sheep. We've been like a wall to protect them." But let's hear what Nabal responded. David is asking, can he have some of the food from their feast? That's their celebration after they've sheared all the sheep. But this is what Nabal said back. 1 Samuel 25, verses 9 through 12. When David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David, and then they waited. And Nabal answered David's servants, "Who's David? Who's this son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I've killed for my shearers and give it to men who come from I do not know where?" So Nabal acts like he doesn't even know who David is. But I am pretty sure that the story of David and Goliath has been heard far and wide. In fact, we're going to hear that Abigail knows about the story. Let's continue reading and see what happens in 1 Samuel 25, verse 13. Verse 12 says, "So David's young men turned away and came back and told him all this." Now let's see David's response. "And David said to his men, 'Every man strap on his sword,' and every man of them strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword. And about 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage." So David is ready for war. He is mad at Nabal for how he's been treated wrongly. Now, here's where we hear about Abigail. Abigail has a response. She hears what's happening in 1 Samuel 25:18 through 20. It says, Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves and 2 skins of wine and 5 sheep already prepared and 5 seahs of parched grain and 100 clusters of raisins, 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on donkeys. And she said to her young men, Go on before me. Behold, I come after you. But she did not tell her husband Nabal. And as she rode on the donkey and came down under the cover of the mountain, behold, David and his men came down toward her, and she met them. So David sees Abigail coming. Let's find out what happens in verse 28 and 29. Now then, my Lord, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, because the Lord has restrained you from. Oh, let's go back. I'm sorry. We want to finish reading what happens when Abigail sees David in verse 27. So it says, And now let this present that your servant has brought to you, my Lord, be given to the young men who followed you. Please forgive the trespass of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you so long as you live. Abigail comes and presents all these gifts and this food to David and his men. And David is so moved by that he decides not to attack Nabal and his household. So Abigail saved the day. And did you hear what Abigail said? She said, let's read that again. She said, a sure house, the Lord will provide a sure house because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord. She believed that David was fighting the battles of the Lord. In verse 29, it says, If men rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, and the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living in the care of the Lord your God, and the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the hallow of a sling. Isn't that interesting that she used the analogy of a sling, that God would sling out his enemies before him? That's what Abigail said about David. And do you remember that David used a sling and a stone to defeat Goliath? Well, that was pretty cool. The Bible is really cool that way. So it says in verse 35, let's finish up. Then David received from her hand what she had brought him, and he said to her, Go in peace to your house. See, I have obeyed your voice, and I have granted your petition. Abigail saved the day, and David didn't have to shed any blood. He had some food for his men, and he was so happy that Abigail helped him to realize that God would fight the battles for him. Well, if you want to read more about what happens to David and to Abigail, finish reading 1 Samuel 25. There's also a free Bible study that you can download. The link will be below so that you can read this whole account of the story of Abigail. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.